Recording. And hello and welcome everyone again to the STEP Central webinar Promoting Diversity in STEM Students, presented by Wendy Borson from Central Washington University, Lucy Casali from the University of Washington, and Matthew Owen from Purdue University. My name is Tanya Siemens, and I'm the manager of STEP Central Project, which works to cultivate a community of practice for STEP grantees and anyone working to improve undergraduate STEM education. STEP Central offers online resources, webinars, blogs, and discussion group forums to encourage co-learning and collaboration on undergraduate STEM education nationwide. So I hope all of you will get onto STEP Central and participate in the discussion. It is my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. Wendy Borson is a professor in the Geological Sciences Department at Central Washington University. She has been the director of the CWU STEP program since 2003, and she's a PI on 2 STEP grants awarded by the National Science Foundation. Matthew Owen is a professor of engineering education at Purdue University and professorial research fellow at Central Queensland University. He studies the longitudinal development of engineering students, team assignments, peer evaluation, and active and collaborative teaching methods. And then finally, Lucy Casali is the Senior Associate Director for Washington MESA, Washington State MESA, Mathematics, Engineering, Science, and Achievement, which builds a pathway to college and careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics for students who are underrepresented in STEM fields. Along with James Dorsey, she is responsible for creating and implementing the MESA Community College Program, which focuses on the retention and transfer of community college students in STEM fields. So with that introduction, I'm going to pass the controls over to Wendy, who will be beginning our presentation today. So here we go. Thank you, Wendy. I'll let you go ahead and start off.
All right, thank you, Tanya. So I'm going to hopefully show my screen and launch my PowerPoint. And is it visible?
Yep.
Yes, I can see it.
Excellent, thank you. Well, good afternoon and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you all with us today. I thought what I'd do to start is just provide a very brief outline of what Matthew, Lucy, and I plan to present today. So first I'll talk about some strategies that we at CWU have used for recruiting and retaining underrepresented students. Lucy will talk about her MESA program and retention of underrepresented students. And Matthew will talk about strategies for tracking diverse populations. And then we will open it to question and answer and discussion. And Tanya will make some concluding remarks. So let's see, I'm trying to advance my, there we go. So the program that I've been involved with for a number of years is the CWU STEP program, and I'll just go straight to this slide. The goal of our program is to recruit and retain freshmen, sophomores, and transfer students, and we try to emphasize traditionally underrepresented students in STEM programs. I wanted to start with a few metrics so you have an idea of the progress that we have made, and thus hopefully it'll give you an idea of the impact that our strategies have made. Our cohorts for the last number of years have been about 85% underrepresented, and our underrepresented definition is first generation, low income, minority, female, and disabled. And so between 2007 and 2013, we've doubled the number of students who apply to the program, again with the majority of underrepresented students. Our STEP students compared to a control group have higher GPAs and declare majors at about twice the rate of the control group. And the control group is a group of students who expressed interest in STEM majors but did not join the STEP program. Over the 5-year period, 2007 to 12, we have increased the rate of ethnic minority graduation with STEM degrees from 13% to 18%. And our retention rate in the STEP program is 92% for our underrepresented students compared to about 79% for CWU in general for the university. So we think that these are metrics that indicate that we have developed some successful strategies. And we have focused on 2 major types of strategies, recruitment and retention. And as the first strategy I'll talk about, we tailored a program of recruitment to our STEP program, the STEM majors, and the College of Sciences in general with the CW Office of Admissions. So this has been a long-standing collaboration. And the outcome of that is that we recently hired, as a university recruiter, a specialized recruiter who will focus on STEM graduates, on the STEM fields. And this person is a graduate of CW. He's bilingual and Hispanic, and he's actually from one of the areas of intense recruiting, so we hope that that creates a community connection. And his job is to visit high schools many times in the Central Washington region. This is an area of high proportion of underrepresented students. And the goal is to develop lasting relationships with teachers and counselors, students and their families, in order to develop a trusting relationship, which then will hopefully allow their transition to CW into these majors. We initially supported this position with our STEP grant, funded by the National Science Foundation, and in the last year we've transitioned that position to a full-time university-funded position. In addition to the recruiter, we also offer some organized visits to CW to meet faculty and students, to visit departments, and we've also organized different kinds of outreach into the community to try to make connections. We also have a strong program of retention for our STEP students. So once the students have joined the program, we try to keep them engaged in the discipline through inquiry-based classes and undergraduate research and teaching experiences that start in the freshman classes and then extend into their sophomore years, and for transfers in the second quarter they arrive. We provide strong academic support through mostly through our STEP office, and we affectionately call our STEP supervisor our stepmom, and she takes care of our students in many ways. She meets with them several times a quarter. She sets up tutoring sessions, advising sessions. She's always there to help them through any difficulties, or also to celebrate their successes. We have a very strong living learning community that the students can join. So I think about 2/3 of our students live in a dorm designated as a living learning community. And so they engage in both curricular and co-curricular activities. And then we have, as a match to the grant and now taken over by the university, we've provided financial support in the form of partial tuition waivers and book stipends. And we've also developed close alliances with other programs like Camp, Trio, and McNair, and these have been very, very important to us for generating support for students who come in who are part of that program, part of those programs. One of the aspects of the recruitment and retention programs that I think we've successfully done, and I think is very important, is the institutionalization, which I know can sometimes be a struggle. And so we're actually very happy with this part of our program. We have fully institutionalized the freshman and transfer classes that are associated with STEP. So those are inquiry-based classes. And we will be able to offer undergraduate research experiences that are fully supported by the College of the Sciences at the termination of our grant. The STEP office will continue to be staffed by our stepmom, and through the university we'll also be able to support tutoring, supplemental instruction, and other kinds of programs that support the academic side of what our students do. As I mentioned, the recruiter is now a permanent member of the admissions staff, and will specifically recruit in the Central Washington region, primarily for high school students, but will recruit for STEP, STEM, and the College of the Sciences. The Office of Enrollment Management will continue the partial tuition waivers, which I think is a very important part of supporting particularly underrepresented students. And the living learning community will also continue through university support. So we have, I think most, if not all of the components of our program fully institutionalized, which means I hope that we'll be able to continue to make progress and improve the metrics that we showed you, and many more, as we continue the program. And so I will just conclude by recognizing a number of individuals within the university who have been very supportive of our program, particularly the College of the Sciences Dean and Associate Dean Kirk Johnson and David Darda. And of course, we are indebted to the National Science Foundation for their continuing support. And of course, I'm also proud of my university because I think we've done a great job at they've done a great job of institutionalizing the program. And with that, I will now attempt to turn the program over to Lucy, who will continue.
Hold on a
So if
second,
you'll just...
Wendy. We did get a question,
You do have a question.
and I just shared it.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Let's see. So let's see, I see a lot of questions here.
So it's how were you able to get the university to provide funding after the grant? Where does the funding come from?
That's a really fine question. I started the discussion of institutionalization 2 years into the 5 years of our grant, reminding the university that this had been a commitment with our with the proposal that we put in, and that the National Science Foundation was relying on us to do this. And through numerous negotiations and a protracted process, I have to say it was a 3-year process, but also continually going back to our dean and our provost and the associate vice presidents for admissions and enrollment, talking about the advancements that we were making. So I think it was substantive discussion coupled with the fortune of having the university be as interested in some of the metrics as the STEP program was. That is, that we want to increase the number of underrepresented students, not only in STEM, but throughout the entire university. And in the state of Washington right now, we're fortunate because the legislature and the governor's office is interested in increasing the number of majors in the STEM programs and advancing our workforce in the state of Washington. So all of those combine, I think, allowed us to develop this institutionalization program, but it was certainly not a foregone conclusion that we would be this successful. So it is a very laborious process.
Thank you, Wendy. And we have had 2 additional questions come in since you asked that one, and you answered that. Shashi asked, how did you gauge the success of the tutoring specifically?
I don't know that we tracked on that specifically. That's a good question. I could probably go back and reconstruct the students' grades prior to their tutoring sessions, but we actually haven't tracked on that metric, so that's a very good question.
Okay, and then the final one, you might be able to see it, but I'll just read it anyways for the benefit of the group, is do you address stereotype threat as identified by Claude Steele and others? If so, how? How essential is this?
We did not directly address a stereotype threat, and I think Matthew either can talk to this, can speak to this better than I can, and I think he might be planning on it, but we didn't specifically address that issue.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly talk about it more later, but I mean, stereotype threat is a funny thing, right? It's, if you explicitly address it with the students, then you're at risk of creating it. So for those who aren't as aware of stereotype threat, it's this sense that when someone receives cues, some kind of sort of scripting, that they're expected not to perform well. So for example, a black student who knows that their grades are being compared to white students, it receives a bunch of messages from our culture that tell them that they're supposed to underperform, and they do. But the same thing, but the effect is robust, so that, for example, if you tell a white student that their grades are being compared with those of Asian students, they will also underperform in response to the same kind of stereotype threat. And so it's based on stereotypes of when you're expected not to perform well, it tends to usually only function in a negative way. So by telling someone they're expected to perform high, I mean, obviously that you don't hurt them by doing that, but you don't get the same kind of advantage that you do get a disadvantage when you communicate to somebody that they're expected to underperform. So anything you do to address stereotype threat has to be behind the scenes by the very nature of it. Similar to what's been talked about, the concept of spotlighting with women. And so we could talk more about it later. In particular, sort of in a anything that a program can do to put people on equal footing is best. So as far as Wendy and Lucy, maybe you could talk about ways that you make it clear that your programs are not remedial. I think that would be the best way to talk about how you address that.
We the financial aid that we provide to students, the tuition waiver is contingent on them maintaining a 3.0 GPA, with the proviso that there are cases where we will allow students to continue with the financial aid. They continue in the program, just not with the financial aid. So it's a carrot, if you will, to maintain performance. And while we didn't directly address the stereotype threat, what I can tell you is that our program is primarily underrepresented students. And their GPAs on average, I think, are about 0.2 or 0.3 higher than the comparative cohort. So I think the environment that we have created with the classes and the curricular and co-curricular support has in effect had a positive, the positive outcome is a higher GPA and performance. And obviously the graduation rate for STEM students who are underrepresented is also increasing. So I think those are metrics that we can at least call upon to show that the environment is supportive to all students. Lucy?
Well, you know, we, pardon me, we have we have a unique model, and we do have a what you call a stepmom, I think, Wendy, but we do have a MESA director who kind of is a hand holder all the way through. Students do have to have a student contract, and they have to have a certain number of visits with an advisor or with the MESA director every quarter or semester. So we shepherd them very closely. If they do get into trouble, we follow that up with even closer monitoring. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we do that might be valuable that others might consider is once you do that student contract, a part of that student contract is that they will attend what we call academic excellence workshops. I think maybe you could somewhat call that like your SI work. The academic students who attend academic excellence workshops have a GPA that averages a full grade point higher than those MESA students who don't attend. Mm-hmm. So we have found some ways that we really do recommend to students. We've started doing training that mirrors the learning styles training they do at Louisiana State. The work that we do is have to have high expectation and don't back down on it.
Great.
Exactly. We do many of the same kinds of things, Lucy, and we've found exactly the same thing, is that that support and that tracking is absolutely key to student success in these programs.
All right, great. Thanks for that question. And I thought I'd take this as an opportunity to get your input on this, the audience input. And I'm going to open up a poll here. So the audience will be able to see a poll pop up on their screen, and you can go ahead and click on the box, select all that apply to you. So what strategies does your university routinely employ to retain underrepresented undergraduates in STEM majors? And we'll give you about 20 seconds to select your responses. Okay. We have 75% voted, 78% have voted. All right. Great. All right, so we haven't received many more for the last couple seconds, so I'll go ahead and close the poll and share results. So now you should all be able to see your responses. Any comments on that, on those responses?
I think what we see in that poll is exactly what we need to do to increase underrepresented participation. It's really a combination of strategies, not a single strategy. The students often have financial challenges at home, So the financial aid part is very important. Obviously the curricular support, but it just can't be curricular support. It has to be also social support for students adjusting to college and so forth. So I think that's that poll reflects precisely what we've learned, and it's the way forward for many of us anyway. I was just addressing a question that came in. Is there a percentage of the tuition waived? If so, is this covered through your funding? We had a standard dollar amount that was given to us. It was initially $1,500, and I think it's now $1,000, basically because of financial challenges from the university, within the university, and it was a match to our grant initially, and now that part has been picked up as an institutionalized piece by the university. So,
okay. All right,
should I?
thank you. Why don't you go ahead and pass the controls over to Lucy then? Thank you.
All right. There's Lucy. All right. All right, Lucy, it's off to you.
All right, I'm going to move very quickly through this. Is everyone able to hold on here? Let's get the. Oops. Okay. Well, we're moving on. So for those of you who don't know about MESA, it is a national program now. We have community college programs in 10 states, and it is a program that supports historically underrepresented minority students and women who are wanting to major in STEM fields. And again, like we just heard from Wendy, there is a lot of academic support and social support. I don't believe that you can separate those two if you are serious about having these students be successful. Our transfer rates are very high. Over the past, we are now entering the 5th year of our grant, and we do have numbers. Actually, we're putting together our poster right now for the STEP meeting, but it really is impressive. Of the 6 community colleges in Washington that we're serving, the lowest success rate is 74%. So and the highest was 96. So I think that we could now begin to think maybe this is a model that we can consider expanding, and we do intend to ask the UW and the State Board of Community and Technical Colleges to help us move forward with funding to try to expand this to more community colleges. Our goals with the STEP grant were to increase the number of the underrepresented minorities who actually came out all the way at the other end of the pipeline. So this was a challenge for us, because once you hand them off to a university, then you really don't have a lot of control. So we really had to consider this as maybe reaching a little too high, but I'm not ready to give up on that yet. And then we wanted to double the retention and successful transfer of students from our partner campuses. When we began this project, we originally had a Step 1A grant, and we were only an engineering model. We have now moved to all STEM fields that are recognized by the NSF. So the Mesa Community College program originally began in California. It began at a time where there was quite sufficient money, and it had 13 components that every program had to implement. When we did it here in Washington, and when we applied for our Step 1B grant, we said we've got to look at the 6 components that seem to have been the most effective in causing our students to be tough, resilient, to be willing to retain, keeping them retained. And as I'm going through here, I want to be a little bit fast because there's quite a few things in here. The academic excellence workshops have been one of the huge successes in helping our students, especially in math, physics, and some of those gatekeeper courses. We also put together an orientation course that's really specific to STEM. Here at UW, they'd always had these first-year experience courses that were very heavily freshman-oriented, yet we needed something that was for our transfer students, and that had never been done. So orientation courses are done at the community college that include aspects of what to expect when you get to the university. Things like transfer shock, things like knowing that maybe you may not get the math and science classes you need. Oops, sorry. You may not get those math and science classes you need on the first quarter, and that you've got to be resilient, working hard to make your way through, because you will eventually get them. So I put in a few points to ponder here on especially if you're an administrator or a faculty member, thinking about how to put a program like this together. Academic rigor and personal commitment are to be expected. We have to have a high degree of rigor. We do not back down on that. You take a math class every quarter or semester. You're not tired of math, you just do it. But in a way, we also have to keep in mind we can't expect them to do it on their own. And this was told to me by Ray Landis, who is he's quite a celebrity in the world of engineering study. He said, well, you know, remember 3 months before you got these kids, they were high school students. And I think that that's something that we do have to remember. The younger ones that we get, we've got to help them put together their path for the future. And remember that for the student, relevance can be the reason he or she chooses to be a chemist or a cosmetologist, a mechanic, or a mechanical engineer. This is something that we need to work together with faculty members to talk about. Relevance for the student really can be a detour out of the STEM fields. So we need to really work with our faculty partners in our programs. Mm-hmm. Building from the ground up, we like to tell folks, if you really want to do this, you have to have a commitment. Your campus, as Wendy said, you've got to have campus commitment. It has to be an institutional commitment. You need staffing. You cannot just reassign someone to 10 or 20% and expect them to be able to shepherd these students through. I mean, if you only have 10 students that you're going to work with, yeah, that might be okay. But if you expect to really build a cohort of students, you need to have a designated person who's able to be the director of this kind of a program. You have to have a constant performance evaluation, constant improvement, and you have to, I have a misspelling, excuse me. You have to commit to frequent self-evaluation and then adjustment. Not admustment, but adjustment. And finally, you have to have a defined administrative structure of consistent leadership. You need to check in frequently with student participants especially, and try to provide some venues where students intersect with faculty outside the classroom. It really helps both ways. Students are busy. They teach because they love to be in the classroom. And it's hard to expect them to spend their time mentoring and hanging out with students when that wasn't the real love that they became a teacher, was because they love to teach. So provide those venues, let faculty get used to the students, let students get used to faculty. As you know, most of our students are not going to a faculty hour is not a normal thing for them, and they have to get used to that. And finally, I think there are some guaranteed, well, I don't want to say guaranteed failure pieces, but they're huge challenges that if you have no visibility on your campus, if you have only, if engineering is highly supportive but chemistry is not, if the divisions don't want to work with you, and if you don't have uniform data collection, that's so difficult. And the success, I think all of us are agreed on the success areas, especially the student database and other data collection. And last but not least, we got to have some space for these programs. Living and learning communities are important. If you don't have that, try to provide a center, a designated, even a small study area. I always tell my MESA directors, locate a small space and start to use it. Once it gets so crowded that administration, or who knows, even the fire marshal starts to see that, hey, what's going on in that room, you'll get your space. It'll work. You'll be okay. I think that I will move it right over to questions and discussion so that we can get Matt and not be running too behind.
There are questions. You're going to read them, Tanya?
Let's see, while Lucy's doing that, I can address the first one. CW and MESA have hired recruiters to reach minority prospective students. What strategies have they found useful in building the pipeline? How is success measured? For our part, we have had a recruiter in place for about 2.5 years, but different recruiters. Our strategies are to have our recruiter have a lot of contact time in the high schools, and also so reach out not only to the teachers and counselors and students, but also their parents. Another, I think, important aspect of our recruiter is that he got dual degrees in chemistry and biology, and he's from the community, one of the major communities in which we recruit. So, and our basic measure of success is whether we see an increase in enrollment of underrepresented students in the STEM majors, and then ultimately, of course, an increase in the graduation rate. And I think we've seen just a bit of that in some of the metrics that I showed. How about you, Lucy? What are your?
Yes, I agree. We look at numbers of student transfers before the program began at that community college, and numbers of student transfers after. We actually looked at all the STEM majors, and then we looked at them combined, and it has been a large increase. In fact, we were a little surprised at how much of a change it made. It's pretty good. We also looked at students transferring to our partner, what were our partner schools, as well as now we have a partnership with ERDC, which is here in Washington, which is a data gathering educational, a large web-based organization that's starting to gather data across the board in all segments. And we're going to look at where our students are going in addition to our partner universities, because we do know some of them are going to Central, some of them are going to Eastern, some are going to Western. And the final thing that we're looking at, and we did not consider this when we first wrote the STEP grant, we are noticing that we have a significant number of students, community college students, who are going on and then majoring in math or some of the sciences, who want to be math and science teachers. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's something we should have looked at or should have put in our original proposal. I consider that a success that we didn't plan for. Let me see, this next one is, what are some strategies for staying in touch with students? Oh, this is a good one, and I will attempt to answer that, because we, as part of the Mesa student contract, you have to spend a certain amount of time in the Mesa Center each week, and that kind of makes a captive group, so that we can keep our hands on them and keep them not only engaged, but let them know that we are there and we're a part of what's going on with their lives. How about you, Wendy? What does the stepmom help in this area?
She does, and we also, for our freshmen, well, and actually our transfers, we have them in freshmen have a 3/4 sequence of classes, so we like you said, we have a captive audience. We also contact them through the Living Learning community. We have events that they are involved in. We also, some of them are on the payroll as TAs or research assistants in labs, and of course, in order to get paid, they have to submit summaries of what they've done and respond to emails. So we do try to establish kind of a professional environment in that regard and make them responsible for reading emails and getting back to us in a timely way. So I think there's a professional standard that we try to set along those lines.
Well, I think that comes also with, and I'm not sure how
That's
much
good, Matt.
you and Matt have in your program, that is focus on career development. But I think that's partly what you're saying, is that if we're starting to teach them about career and professional behavior, then these are some things that we have to stress early on, as early as the orientation course.
Yes, yes. So it looks like, there we go, Matt. That looks great.
Better?
Your control panel's still, if you could move your, let's see. There, we're almost there. Now you have a fault through. There we go. That's perfect.
Like I put away the control panel on the window. All right. Hi. So just to say first, I'm presenting here, but there are a whole lot of other people behind this that support this work, that that have been part of a very large team studying a very large database. And so here's a description of the Midfield database. You can see there what it stands for. It's got whole population data for a very large number of students. It does have a regional bias of being from the Southeast because it grew out of the Succeed Coalition. It's got about 10% of all the engineering graduates in the country at these institutions, and a total of 1 million students, of whom 200,000 have touched engineering. And I say touched because some started, some finished, and some came into the middle and never finished at all. We have them all, as well as policy and qualitative information. And so focusing on this today, one of the nice things about that is having whole population data, we have larger numbers of some of the smaller populations. And so not only can we say things about what is happening in their experience and about the ways that they act in the curriculum, but we can also see how the different metrics that people use to look at engineering populations affect different populations differently. And so in particular, we would say, from our experience, to pay attention to choosing metrics that support diversity. In other words, to be able to actually understand what's happening to diverse populations, and in particular, to choose metrics that do not bias against them. So in the case of a very common couple of metrics like first-year retention or 2-year retention, and even all the way up to 8-semester persistence or retention, those actually systematically over-report the persistence of the minority populations. So because those statistics are so dominated by white students that the overall aggregate performance will look like what is happening to the white students, and the white students will drown out any understanding of what's happening to other smaller populations. And so I have a series of figures to show how true this is. in fact, how different the behaviors are within the curriculum based on not just race, but also the intersection of race and gender. There's also disciplinary variation. So in other words, these graphs would not look the same if we graphed them separately for different disciplines. Not enough time or space to show all of that. We do have sufficient populations to actually go into those issues. And we're starting to publish into different disciplinary contexts. But for now, when people look at the aggregate, and in this case, what I'm showing is the white students, this is what it looks like. And the perception of weeding out is actually sort of borne out by the data, which is to say the tendency for schools is to keep a smaller fraction of students to 8 semesters into the curriculum. That's 8 semesters of enrollment, whether or not they're continuous. And then the percentage on the vertical axis is how many of those graduate within 6 years from that point forward. And so the fact that the data in this particular graph for white students tends to be, not only is the behavior fairly similar for males and females, but it tends to be clustered in the upper left corner, is representative of the fact that what people think of as being a weed out culture. But in fact, the situation is entirely different for Asian students who are clustered in the upper right-hand corner, which is representative of a behavior of tending to stay longer in the 8th semester and then still graduating. And not, I don't want to put us at risk of model minority issues. So I will say this is very different in certain disciplines. For example, whereas computer and electrical engineering are known for having many Asian students, Asian students are almost completely absent from biomedical engineering. So there are some fascinating disciplinary stories. When we look at black students, what we see is, the stereotype would be that they're going to do poorly, whereas in fact we have some institutions where they do quite well, so it's actually much more a socioeconomic issue than a race issue, it turns out, when we look more closely. We can see some institutions which are represented by a letter here. Institution G, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse moving. Institution G, the males and females perform almost identically as far as their pathways, whereas at some institutions like E, there's a very big difference, like a 20% difference in persistence. And so a lot of diversity in exactly what happens there, to the extent that some institutions like C tend to keep students quite a bit longer, and yet their success rate is absolutely hideous from that point forward. The situation for Hispanic students is entirely different. Hispanic students, although people would tend to put them in some of the same stereotypical categories, they are tending to graduate in 6 years as long as they persist to 8 semesters. And so the y-axis component here is very high for most of these populations, which is on the one hand great to see. On the other hand, right, obviously, certainly recruitment is the other side of the story, right? There aren't a lot of them, but to make it onto this graph, I think they need to be at least 100 over the time period. So they're big enough numbers. Native Americans, we can make claims about fewer of them. Here, to qualify for a data point, there must be at least 10 over time. And most of the populations, in fact, only at one institution do we have a sufficient number of women to make that happen. But we have a few institutions where we have enough men to make that happen. And again, the yield is actually quite high. So the percentage that after they persist for 8 semesters that graduate is higher than in some of the other populations. So a different story than a lot of people might expect. And then to just wrap up, there are some questions that I think Tanya is going to launch a poll. But the big message is that those, particularly those intermediary persistence measures, they actually create a systematic bias that over-reports persistence. And so if the aggregate is reported, then the aggregate is typically much higher than it would be for some of these populations. And so I guess I'll pass it back to Tanya as I leave it here on this particular slide, which has a lot of acknowledgements. And,
we can leave it on your slide. I don't have a slide to show.
Okay. Or should we leave it on my side?
I'll just open up the poll so people can address that question. So go ahead and audience attendees, go ahead and chime in. How does your school analyze and report retention attrition data? If you know. Okay, the 56%, 59% voted. Okay, we'll leave it there. I know not all of you will have an answer to this. Oh, there's 63%. Great. I'm going to close the poll now and share the results.
So I'm not seeing those.
Okay. It's 70% routinely disaggregated by race, ethnicity. 55% is routinely disaggregated by gender, and 30% says that they're disaggregated simultaneously, race, ethnicity, and gender. So fewer schools disaggregate simultaneously.
But some, and so I mean, I think we're making progress from what has traditionally been a fairly homogeneous thinking on that issue, and I mean, some will not do it. Some will not do both because they actually have such small numbers that they can't. So that's good, I think. And did you have the other question about how data, what kinds of data are kept?
Yeah, were there, yes, I will open up that poll. So we got another quiz for you guys, or just a survey. So if you can see the question on your screen, go ahead and select what measures of diversity are routinely tracked by your institution. Okay. Last chance, last chance. All right, I'm going to close the poll now and share results. And I'm not sure why you're not able to. Are you able to see it this time, Matt?
Let's see. It says that you have to hide the poll results to enable screen sharing.
Oh, okay. I'll just tell you it's equal split for the first two, 70% and 70% said first generation college students, and that you have census definitions of ethnicity that include multiple ethnicities, and then 40% said multiracial students are included in standard reports.
Nice. That's made a lot of progress actually probably in the last decade. Excellent.
Great. Thanks to everyone for participating, trying to make our presentation interactive. Do we have any questions? Any additional questions for Matt or others? We're at the end of our presentation now, and so if anybody would like to try to speak, if you have a question you'd like to ask out loud, you can raise your hand and we can try opening up the mics for you. Here we go. So Javier, I'm going to turn on your mic and let's cross our fingers we don't get too much echo. Okay, Javier, go ahead. No. Okay, never mind then. We do have some questions that came in through the typing. Oh, he doesn't have a mic. Oh, okay. Sorry about that, Javier. He doesn't actually have a mic, so he's lowering his hand. Michelle McAllister asked if it would be possible to receive a copy of the PowerPoint, and yes. Oh, actually, I can't speak for the other presenters. We will have a copy of the recording online, but I'm not. Is it okay to share their PowerPoint presentations that you've shared today?
Sure.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Okay. We do have another. Thank you. We have another hand raised, I believe. Oh, nope, that's not. Okay. Well, I think unless we have more questions from the audience, then I will go ahead and stop recording, and then I'm going to take a quick moment to orient you all to where you can find the PowerPoints and the recordings on steps